But an audience's expectation for a low-budget film, if I'm going to see it at the Slamdance Film Festival, I know all bets are off for my audience expectations, because that's where a film can be radical, and that's where a film can be subversive, can break the rules. So it's interesting to have a film like Paranormal Activity that was a film that could play with that sort of level of anarchy, and did indeed have quite, some would say, a radical ending. And then it had another ending which was more middle of the road. Well, neither of those two endings which the director shot, and he showed both of them at film festivals, neither of those made it to the cinemas as we're seeing it now. The one that actually is there now, all of the involved parties say that Steven Spielberg actually wrote it for them. So I guess here's the thing, when you get your film bought and distributed by Paramount, you don't turn down Steven Spielberg when he says he wants to rewrite the ending. But I thought that the ending was the thing that probably let me down the most, because other than the pacing, which I did think was needlessly slow, I thought they could have either made it as a short film or given me more content that kept me in a sustained mood of horror. Whereas all the mundane conversations and the jokey boyfriend and the plot holes, you know, all over the place, I just felt like I was repeatedly taken out of the film by all these different things, rather than having that sustained mood. But the ending disappointed me most of all, because it just seemed like it turned into a genre picture at that point, like almost a Japanese horror remake, which is not the type of film it is. So anything I admired about the film being on the edge and being raw in certain ways, by inserting that Hollywood ending, which is exactly what you can call it, I mean, Steven Spielberg wrote it, it's like it negates everything that happened up until that point.
What the film was attempting to be. Well, I feel that and if you'll forgive the pun here, it's kind of the phantasm or specter that I have to call to the table, and that is the Blair Witch Project.
Sure.
You know, for me, even just seeing the trailer, honestly, I was not that motivated initially to see it, because I just thought to myself, okay, this is the Blair Witch Project 11 years later in someone's home.
Right.
I mean, in terms of, does this kind of film, you know, like, does the horror film genre like just call these independent kind of, you know, well, at least shall we say, very small budget productions? Do you think there's some kind of intrinsic attraction to the idea of a internal, or, you know, the internal workings of a horror film that draws these independent productions?
I think very low budget and micro budget becomes easier when you're working with horror. And not, you know, for many reasons, but not least of which, that the biggest direct-to-DVD market within mainstream film is horror films. You've got endless horror films going direct-to-DVD. So I think that you can do it at low cost, you can maximize your profits off of it by doing it that way. But even with Blair Witch Project, I would say that that was a much more genuinely unimpeded or, you know, natural process of becoming rags to riches story than was Paranormal Activity. Because those filmmakers really took the time to put everything in place, the mythology they created with the website, the interviews they gave, the characters they created. They put everything in place for it to really pick up steam after it showed at the festivals. Whereas Paranormal Activity did the opposite. They suggested that there was this great demand for the film, which wasn't, but then they could put it in all those theaters anyway. So I think with horror films, even before Blair Witch, you had a film called The Last Broadcast, which a lot of people say directly influenced Blair Witch Project. And then in the wake of Blair Witch Project, you had the St. Francisville Experiment, I think it was called, that was another of these exact type of films. So I think even if we say that the budget structure supports horror films, there's an additional layer of a certain kind of subgenre that these films fit within. And I think that you're going to continue to see them. But I feel like probably Blair Witch Project is the one that earned its status most out of all those I just mentioned. So I guess, you know, we only have about a minute left. Are there any other films that you saw this year that are upcoming that look like you anticipate these issues with pace or genre or audience or marketing?
The one film that I'm most interested in seeing coming up is definitely I believe his name is Hillcoat, the director. His vision of Cormac McCarthy's The Road.
Right.
I'm very curious to see. It looks like from the trailers that they've had to do a little manufacturing as well in
Yeah.
terms of it's an apocalyptic film. And in the text, there's very little mention of the apocalypse. In fact, it's background. Whereas in the trailer, it's quite an important aspect. So just in terms of pacing and creating content, I'm concerned to see, and even as a genre film, the apocalyptic film, what direction it heads in. In terms of audience expectation, I think it'll be horrific enough for those that are even aware of what the film is about. And how about you, Tommy? Anything?
Well, I won't. I'll go off of your comment and say that I feel like The Road has probably already been made unintentionally, but there was a film called Time of the Wolf. That's
Yes, the French film.
as
I've seen that.
probably as good a representation of what The Road reads like as you'll get, but that's not what a lot of audiences want. So in terms of pacing, Time of the Wolf probably is more accurate to that book, to The Road, but the film The Road, I agree with you. It looks like they've had to, at least within the marketing, create this veneer of something that excites.
Right, adventure.
Exactly.
All right, well, this was another episode of Watch This, again with your hosts, Frank Cole and Tommy Britt. We'll have another episode coming up real soon. Thank you.